Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Today, the co-host is Chris Rossini. He is also the editor of the RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Chris, welcome to the program today.
Great to be with you, Dr. Paul, for another episode of Mythbusters.
Well, there's still some myths out there that we keep working on, so what do you have for us?
Let's start off with, politicians long ago discovered that if they're able to promise free stuff to people, it gets them elected. We're seeing that again this year with Bernie Sanders, foremost Bernie Sanders. And a lot of times the supporters, we tell them, he has to basically steal from someone in order to give you something. And a lot of times the supporters, they'll justify it in their mind somehow just to make them feel better. And they'll say, oh, well, he'll cut from the military or cut from wasteful spending, but that still doesn't change the dynamics of what occurs in order for him to give free stuff away. So Dr. Paul, can you please talk about this justification process that goes on and how nothing really is free?
It's been said that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this reminds me of the cartoon that you found and we have on our website of the individual coming up to Bernie Sanders and say, hey, I really like what you're talking about all this free stuff, because I'd like that. But where do you get the money? At the same time, Sanders is there with his hand reached around and pulling out the guy's wallet. So that tells you where it comes from. It comes from government, yeah, but where does the government get it? Yeah, this is age old, but it's the sin of the 20th century for the United States, because the entitlement system has been going on and steadily growing throughout the past 100 years, especially since the Progressive era and from with the Depression, and the wrong things were being blamed. So the answer has always been, as it is today, more stuff free. If people can't pay for it, and debt, we don't worry about debt. We've had many generations now that have taught Keynesian economics that debt is not all that bad. It's just so the people will spend the money, even if they have instincts to say, well, I should save my money in case I have a rainy day. But that's bad. You're not supposed to think that way. So it's always the government that's going to come to the rescue. Now, you mentioned Sanders' name in the introduction, and that is true. He's so well known for all the free stuff he's going to pass out. Republicans do the same thing, but they don't brag about it. But yesterday I heard Hillary on a program, and she actually stole a lot of the words from Sanders, because she's supposed to be a little bit more moderate, in passing out free stuff. But she talked about free college education. Junior college was going to be totally free. They weren't going to have any debt and could go through regular college. And so her characterization of this was just like words out of Sanders' eyes, because obviously Sanders is making points on this free stuff. But the end comes when the reality sets in that there is no free stuff. There is no such as free lunch. Sometimes people get stuff for free by manipulation. So if you look at the last 50 years, the country's been so wealthy, we've had such a strong currency, we've been able to borrow, and a lot of people in a way have gotten it for free, but there's always a cost, but it's never directed out proportionally to the people who had the benefits. For instance, during the housing bubble, houses were free, and people were making a lot of profit speculating with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But then the collapse comes, and so there has to be a payment. But guess what? Those people who made those huge profits, they didn't have to pay. But some of the people who were sort of innocent bystander and innocent beneficiaries, those who were getting houses, they lost their jobs and they lost their houses, and that market really hasn't recovered since. So this principle of something for free is so deceptive, and it's sort of like I think there's an instinct in everybody. Oh boy, am I going to strike it rich? Maybe I can win the lottery. And when the lottery so high a couple weeks ago, the cars were lined up at the places that were selling lottery tickets, always hoping to win the lottery. And I think this is it. I think people realize it might end, but they're always hopeful. And I think lawsuits are a lot like this. Well, yeah, I don't know who's guilty or what, but maybe with these advertisements on TV, let's just sue somebody and I can win the lottery. Well, winning the lottery is not going to happen eventually, because everybody's going to suffer. It's going to challenge our whole concept of liberty, and it's going to challenge the concept of what the government should be doing. But there is no such thing as a free lunch, and the sooner the people in this country wake up to it, the sooner they will come around to believing that the founders were correct, free markets are better, sound money is better, and that self-reliance and responsibility for oneself is much better than thinking for a minute that somebody in the federal government will take care of us from cradle to grave. That is an illusion, and it is a myth.
Yes, correct. And next, Dr. Paul, let's go to government and racism. Government is always preaching to us, preaching down to us, of course, about not paying attention to someone's skin or their gender or their age and everything. And yet it's the same government that gives us forms, and they want to know our age, our sex, our race. They want to know everything about us. It doesn't stop there, of course. And if we look at the election season, they use that information, and then they slice and dice their message to get the black vote or the Hispanic vote or this vote. And this is the same government that tells us not to pay attention to the color of skin. So can you please talk about this blatant hypocrisy?
Well, the polling and the elections are all attuned to racism, even though they would deny this. But, you know, the census is designed, especially that extensive questionnaire on the census on what people think and believe. And usually the political party in charge has an advantage of getting that information where everybody else does not have it. But no, the racism really gets institutionalized by governments. Markets tend to want to correct it. So our government, from the very beginning, you know, we're very much in racism and talk about two races, and slavery was going on. And even after the Civil War, which was not designed really to free the slaves as much as to destroy the Republic, but yeah, the slaves were free. But then the government moved in with Jim Crow laws, and they practiced racism all the way through. Military, even through World War II in my lifetime, they were still segregating people in the military. So, but they use it all the time. Walter Williams, a black economist that is well respected, he explains this because he was raised in the inner city of Philadelphia, but now is obviously a well-known professor and a libertarian type. And he said, why do I need a black leader? So black leaders have part of this too. Black leaders are part of the government to institutionalize these concepts. It really bothers me as a libertarian when they say, how's the black vote going to do? Well, why do they even ask that question, even though people can come up with statistics, but I don't like it, you know, the description of a group, you know, and base their rights on that. Rights should be individual, so it's a distraction from individual rights, and therefore it's the inequality that we find in our court system is the fact that we don't treat everybody equally. Now, you know, one comment and one person that has been in many ways heroic in his effort to try to change the relationship between black and white, and actually was strongly anti-war, was Martin Luther King. But he made this very strong point, he's quoted all the time, that the one thing that he wanted to see his children grow up where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their character. But why have we lost it, and why have the leaders of these communities only talk about this? What are you going to do for the black community? What are you going to do for the Hispanic community? I ask, what are you going to do for liberty? And why is it that everybody doesn't universally accept the principles of liberty? You would bring people more together if they understood the principles of liberty and how important the market economy is, because that's how people come together. And this idea of rights should not be divisive. But if you put rights in categories, women's rights and children's rights and minority rights and all this, this is very divisive and does not answer it. But quite frankly, this is not an easy argument to make, because people will twist this. They won't say, well, yeah, we can't talk about character yet until you get rid of all of this racism stuff. So I think the one thing, the principle of libertarianism would go a long way. Just think of what has happened over the years with voluntary approaches. One of the greatest integrators in our country, a long time before we had forced federal laws on what to do in schools and things, was in sports. Just look at what has happened in sports, and most of it, the Jackie Robinsons and others, they excelled in that, and yet I think of the runner under Hitler. He was great, and he was a black person, and it was in sports that you have this integration. But if we would just get out of the way of trying to think that just the use of force and putting people in categories is the answer, I think if we got out of the government, got out of the way, and didn't and the media didn't always preach the gospel of groups. How did this group vote? How did that group vote? We'd get along a lot faster about integration.
Yes. Next, Dr. Paul, let's move to foreign policy. And in a recent Republican debate, candidates were going back and forth on 9/11 and who's to blame and who was president at the time and who didn't get bin Laden. Yet they were all, it just went over their head as to the genuine reason as to why America gets attacked. And you, Dr. Paul, were famously on stage and you had to explain it to Rudy Giuliani. So once again, Dr. Paul, please explain that maybe it's not certain individuals, but the philosophy of our foreign policy that causes all this hatred towards us.
Well, I think most people know my position on this because our foreign policy has blowback. When we do the wrong thing to people or it's misinterpreted, people get angry and they want to come back and hurt us for this. But the real basic problem is interventionism, that we're in their face and we bomb their countries, we occupy it, and a lot of people die. But the one thing about some of the worst human beings on earth as far as initiating violence, sometimes they tell us the truth. In one sense, bin Laden probably wasn't a liar, on what he said. So when he was quizzed, even after 9/11, he gave an answer on why Al-Qaeda and why he so strongly endorsed it was the fact that that he endorsed it because of our policies, and he listed three things. The first thing was the constant bombing of Iraq, and also the troops in Saudi Arabia, and what he interpreted to be a foreign policy that was favorable and harmful to the Palestinians over Israel. And he listed these as reasons for their concern. But no, it's the policy of interventionism, and nobody wants to talk about it because both political parties endorse interventionism. They won't say, well, we can't ever look to ourselves. It's very difficult. When a person has a problem, if it's a personal problem of drinking or whatever, they don't want to say, it's my fault, I'm going to clean up my act, I'll take responsibility for this. No, it isn't that way. And a country doesn't like to do it either. The country always has to be the greatest. And some of that is good if we're truly great. But if we're truly great, we don't have to brag about it. But people do not want to say, well, some of our problems here at home, not only is it blowback from other foreign countries, but some of our problems, say, with China and Mexico, might have to do with our economic policies. It might have to do with our trade policies. It might have to do with a false economy, and it might have to do with our Federal Reserve. They don't want to say that we have responsibility. So let's blame the Chinese, let's blame the Mexicans, let's blame somebody else, but never and look to it, because then you're saying, oh, you're un-American. And the old saying is that if they can just say that we're being attacked, and if you're not willing to stop them from attacking, then you're unpatriotic and you're going to make the country very, very put it into grave danger. So that is what goes on. It's a political thing. One party tries to blame the other party, no matter what, but the individuals probably are less important, because I think sometimes if you really wanted to sort out a lot of things that are going on in foreign policy, you'd have to really have a full understanding of the CIA and the monetary system and all the other things that go on. This might be just beyond the control of one or two individuals who are supposed to be in control, but nevertheless, it's all a facade. It's a myth to think that as bad as George Bush was, he had a horrible foreign policy, made things much worse. But to say that 9 months after he was in office, that he alone was responsible for 9/11, I don't buy into that. But I believe that the neocon philosophy has been around a long time, and he was part of that, and he perpetuated the problems. But it's the philosophy of the neocons that's the real culprit when you look at the disastrous results of our foreign policy.
Yes, and let's go to the neocon counterparts in the monetary sphere, the PhD Keynesians. We'll finish up with them, Dr. Paul. They're constantly in the press trying to convince the public that gold is a barbarous relic, or some even call it a useless pile of rocks. And basically they want the public to just keep gold out of their mind so that they can continue with their central planning. Now, when they say that gold is just a bunch of useless rocks, they're actually showing a bit of ignorance on how gold became money and maintained itself as money for thousands of years, even up to today. So if you could please discuss why gold, why not another rock or precious metal, and how it came about to be money.
Well, there's two things there. One is total ignorance, because they probably never read the history of money. They probably don't have any idea about Austrian economics, so they believe the myths that they have been taught for the last 50, 60, 70 years that paper is money. Even the Federal Reserve Board chairman, they say gold is not money. Now, they may not truly believe that, but it's very important. Not only are they confused economically, so many of them, but they also know about power. If you have a gold standard and a gold coin standard where you can always call the government when they're being dishonest on whether or not this gold certificate, you can always get your gold. Every single day you could vote for the gold standard by checking it out and see if they have the gold there. They don't want that, because then they don't have this power to inflate and run up debt and pyramid debt, because they actually believed in that system. But the real myth is that paper is a good substitute. And once again, as you allude to, the fact that they don't understand how money came into effect. So if you go way back in history, 5,000 years ago, there was bartering going on, and it was rough. It was not smooth transition. But as time went on, people found out that you didn't have to barter just goods because it's so unequal, that if they could find a single commodity that was easily divided and transported, that maybe they could agree and translate value of one good and another good to the value that they saw in a gold currency. So this is hard money, real money developed in the marketplace. If you just can't out of the clear blue say, oh, okay, let's print paper money. And I make fun of the idea that if a group of people get stranded on an island and they have to survive, and they say, well, the first thing we're going to do is set up a monetary board, because if we could just find some paper and let them write some numbers on there and call it money, then we're going to be a wealthy society. They don't talk about, we can ignore work and trade and all these things, that we'll just have the money. But, they say, well, there's unusual circumstances. No, they're the same real circumstances of people believing that the creation of money creates real value. And that's where it breaks down, because the only solution to too much paper money floating around the system for the last several decades has been, since the collapse in '09, has been to print more money and make it cheap, to decide that people don't even have to pay interest on it. And lo and behold, they can't convey value to this. People people aren't all of a sudden saying, well, let's trade in dollars and let's build a new industry and let's have economic growth again, because they're trusting in a system that is untrustworthy, and the whole world is based on this. So not only have they created paper money out of thin air, they've created a system called it's pyramiding of debt, or fractional reserve banking. So debt upon debt upon debt, and it makes the correction so much more difficult because that all has to contract. So the myth is just way out of proportion to the reality that paper money created by politicians can serve as true money. The only reason that the dollar still serves as money to a large degree has been the acceptance by the world still, because at one time we were truly had the strongest currency of the world, especially after World War II. We had 700 million ounces of gold, and we were so-called backing our, we had a gold exchange standard, and people followed that. But today, that is so far gone, but the trust is still there. The only thing that's holding this myth together where paper will work is the fact that once the dollar did originate, and it originated as the Spanish mill dollar, and it was a silver dollar. But that is gone. All we're waiting for now is the liquidation of the debt and the absolute need for monetary reform. And once again, they will have to have true reform by picking a currency, whether it's in the marketplace or by government, picking a currency that has and is accepted by the people and was accepted by the marketplace, and not some concoction out of a computer or out of a printing press. And I think that time is coming, and it is not too far off. But Chris, I want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Very good, and I want to thank the listening and viewing audience today for being with us, and please come back to the Liberty Report soon.